Storming bracket!
What's going on, everyone? So welcome to the latest podcast episode. I'm obviously joined today with Dennis Bereznyak.
How you doing?
Dennis. This is something a little bit differently. Normally we obviously just do audio with some pictures, but obviously we're in person today. We're able to, both visually be able to see us guys, as well as obviously I'll be showing pictures from Mortality, as well as obviously some visual imagery from that. But we discussed Will Open Drive, and Dennis wanted to see obviously my next film, so we're here today to talk about that. Dennis, how you feeling about this?
I feel good. I'm excited to talk about this. I like this setup. I think the audience will enjoy this as well. And yeah, let's get into it.
All right, absolutely. So we just finished watching it. What are your thoughts right out of the gate?
Very interesting, very different from Willow Pen Drive. The visuals are amazing, both in terms of the crispness. Like we talked how you did it on an iPhone 11, and I can't believe how crisp it actually turned out. The choices of visuals to include, and I'm going to ask this a little bit later, but I thought you chose some great visuals to include. It really is so crisp and beautiful. I like the voiceover. I like the soundtracks. I was going to ask if you had someone compose that, but then I read that it was from different places.
Yeah.
But regardless, I think it fits really well. I mean, it's a great example of the visual storytelling that you tell me that you enjoy when other movies do. I think you did a great job with that.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, I definitely do enjoy visual storytelling, so I'm glad that you were able to appreciate all the visuals and everything. And yeah, to answer your question, my one friend who composed Incisor, he wasn't available. He was going through a lot, so I was like, okay, I'll just use music that when I'm thinking about making a movie and everything, there's a lot of times where there's certain pieces from other movies that I'll be thinking about, and I'll put it in as tempo music is what it's called. Basically, it's supposed to just be temporary, but a lot of times you'll see in big blockbusters where that ends up actually being put into it. So that was kind of the case for here, and I normally hate that, but obviously I'm a low budget filmmaker, so I kind of had to. But yeah, I'm glad that you really got a lot out of that. And you said you had a couple questions about the about the I think it was, might have misheard, but about some of the visuals, right?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to know what was your thought process? Can you talk about maybe some of the specific visuals and why you chose them and what they represent? Maybe your favorite visuals, or maybe how you went about coming up with the visuals that you wanted to include?
Yeah, absolutely. Spoiler alert, by the way, in case you haven't seen the short. It's only 10 minutes. I'll put the link down below. But yes, I can get into that. So what I wanted to have it be is that the movie starts off where it's very slow. You just see a lot of imagery of the water, animals are living and everything. And then you slowly see the waves starting to kind of get faster and faster. The tempo is getting a lot faster. In addition to that, you start seeing those animals, they're dying. You see certain animals that visually saw they were alive, and then next thing you know, it's they're dead. And then also you see literally one bird flying towards something, and then towards the end of, basically it's a 3-act structure but in a 9-minute short. By the end of the first bit, you see that bird is literally then flying away. Originally it was flying towards it, flying away. So that's what I wanted to kind of gauge the audience to kind of slowly almost feel like a storybook. That's what I was kind of going for, almost like something that you hear in a bedtime story, which is one of the reasons why I was going for the dialogue. I mean, not the dialogue, but the narration. I wanted to actually ask you about that. Did you pick up on what the narration was from?
I didn't. I actually wanted to ask you if you wrote it.
I did not. Actually, all of that is from the Bible. The Bible.
The Bible. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It sounded very biblical. When I was watching it, I was thinking is it from the Bible or did he write it? And I kind of just figured that maybe he wrote something in a biblical style, because I know you had a religious upbringing.
I did.
So I thought you might have written your own dialogue to mimic the Bible, but it's actually from the Bible.
Yep. There's the only word that I didn't actually write. Obviously I did my research and everything with I wanted specific verses and everything. But the only word was hark at the very end. And that honestly is almost from the Bible. So
And what does that mean, hark?
It means listen.
Oh, okay.
Which really kind of hits home with the ending that I was going for, where it's he says hark, listen, and it's all of a sudden you just hear the waves. That's it. You hear that nothing's listening. And you can look at it many different ways. I mean, honestly, that's one of the things I wanted to go for this movie. Obviously, I have my interpretations as the director, but once you release something, it's for the public to pretty much come up to terms with. But Yeah, I mean, those were some of the visuals early on that I was going for, and then by the end, I was just going for like that whole like, death is coming upon you, and that's why literally someone's dressed in a cloak, like he's supposed to be death, kind of coming on,
Right.
The main character.
What inspired you overall to make this film?
Good question. Honestly, it was a bunch of different things. I think one of the main things was that obviously after Willow Drive, I was like in post production, like I was getting ready to obviously have it released and everything, and I was like, well, I want to do a next project, but I want to make it a short film. And I'll never forget, I was in the apartment, and I was watching The Last Temptation of Christ. It was Easter, and I hadn't been invited to Easter with my parents and everything, so I was thinking about that in addition to also The Last Temptation of Christ, which is a movie that like when it came out, a lot of Christians condemned. So I was thinking about that, and then I was also thinking about The Lighthouse. So just those three things combined, in addition to also the Seventh Seal, those four things combined, I was just like thinking about it, and I was like, I just started really thinking about all the things in my childhood and everything, and I was like, well, what if you do a movie that has like Christian imagery, and it also has like Christian narration? A lot of movies that you'll watch that are like Christian based, they don't really have a lot to say that isn't already hit over the head by most people that already are going to see those movies. So I wanted to kind of have a different take on like a movie that's dealing with like spirituality as well as just like death. Because, when you think about it, like, family is supposed to be kind of like the foundations of things, so it's like when you don't have that, per se, really, you kind of start thinking more about, like, death and everything, and even though I'm only 25, it was still something that I was thinking about, and I was like, it's something that terrifies me, so why not do something about it? So, I know that's long-winded, but that was my mindset, like, those were the movies, and that was, like, the situation where I came up with the idea, and I was like, let me get to writing, so I just started writing it, and just...
Wow.
Flowed.
That's the beautifulest thing, when it kind of just comes to you and it flows. Like well, you don't have to like really struggle to come up with it, but when it's just like you have like an epiphany almost.
Exactly, and it's like it felt like also the next chapter. This is about death and just kind of like running away from it, or also coming to terms with things. So
it's some stuff you're talking about made me think of something in my life where last week I went to a Unitarian church.
I do remember.
Which is that. Like it's non-denominational, so everybody's welcome there. Jews, Christians, all different types of Christians, atheists, everybody's welcome. It's just kind of like a spiritual tradition or whatever. Right. It's my first time being there, but the sermon last week was on like death, like accepting your own mortality.
Oh wow, that's
yeah. It was because for Halloween, because it's like All Saints Day or whatever, or and then there's different cultures have like Day of the Dead, like the Mexican, Hispanic, they have Day of the Dead. So that's the time when people think about death. So that they were talking about that, how like accepting death is a part of life and we're all gonna die. They really, repeated that a lot in the sermon. So that's connected to your movie. Can you describe the overall thought process behind selecting visuals to tell a story since there's minimal dialogue? Like how do you go about thinking of what visual you want, and how does that connect to your vision of how you want the story to be told? Because if you're writing, it's like, well, I'm going to write what they say, I'm going to write what they do, and it's kind of straightforward. But how do you what's the artistic process behind selecting visuals to do that same thing?
Excellent question. Really like that question, actually. So my whole thing with the visuals, I knew what I wanted, but I also knew a lot of those images would be kind of hard to find. So what I did was, and you can ask my fiance, I would literally do this when we would go down the shore all the time. I would literally have it where there would be like a couple hours, like on days. I would just be going on the beach and film. And I learned this from Terrence Malick, who's a director. Just go around, film stuff. Film as much as you can. Film what you would want to see. And I wanted to have it. I felt bad saying this, especially even now, especially now it's on camera, but I felt bad saying it, but I wanted to film stuff that was alive, but then also stuff that was dead. It's because the movie's about that.
Right.
But that's something obviously you have to go looking for, so that's why sometimes it would take a couple hours. So I would be looking for those kind of things. I have in my mind what I would want, but I would have to then visually see the area that I was at, what that was exactly. So that was tough. Again, it takes patience, but again, I always tell people, it's like if you want to do filmmaking, it's like you really want to try to film as much as possible. It's better to have too much footage than too little.
Of course. So how did you? So you just stumbled upon the certain dead animals and stuff. So that took some luck to make sure,
I felt like a serial killer, to be honest. I was like, wow, I'm filming dead stuff. But at the same time, I was like, okay, I didn't kill them. So I was like, so that was kind of my morality, so to speak. But the other thing is the beach that I filmed it at, there are stuff that does kind of wash up as dead. But again, it's like a luck of the cards where it's like, okay, one day there might not be, one day there might be. So it's just kind of like, I was like, oh, thank God I found it.
Right. And so overall, you kind of just filmed whatever you thought might be interesting, and then you later on narrowed it down to what you thought
Exactly.
was. That's I like that thought process. That's like so it's not like I need this. Let me go out and do this. It's kind of like, let me just open my mind to what's going on. This might be interesting. And then later on, sifting through and this, I don't need this. I'll put here this. That made it look very natural. It really
Right.
felt like not a day in the life, but it felt like, I don't know. It felt like really, like this is really happening almost.
And to add on to what you're saying, the other thing I was going for, like, with that is, if as you know, like when you're planning things, stuff goes wrong.
Of course.
Like, you can go in and say you want this, but it's like the reality is you might not get all of that. There might be some things where it's like you might not have, but it's like if you go in kind of like with an open slate where it's like these are the things you want, but you might also find something else that might be better or might be a welcome addition. Because I'll be honest, there was times with Incisor where I was like, okay, this is going to happen, and then I would get there, and keep in mind I scouted the area out already, but there were like things that might have changed, or also like, oh, you have to worry about like people and everything. And I'm not going to lie, shooting Mortality was so difficult because did you get the feeling that like it was very isolated, like there was nobody around? Dude, it was on a packed Saturday. There was
Really?
so many people. I'll have to show like imagery from like behind the scenes, but dude, there were so many people. So it was like, it was chaotic to try to like film around them. But.
So how'd you even do that? Because you would just find like small segments where there's nobody, and just film, and then compile it with another small, and then so because it looked like it was completely empty. I thought maybe you did it on the evening or not. That wouldn't make sense because it would be dark. But like I thought you did it at some totally dead day.
No, dude, it was so packed. It was insane. Like, I knew it was gonna be busy, but I was like, okay, maybe with COVID and everything. But down there, they act as if COVID didn't happen. Yeah, so it was, dude. I felt like it was like the scene in Jaws, where just like the packed beach. It was like, yo, this is insane. But honestly, it worked out though because there was like a thunderstorm, so like it was crazy packed, and I managed to film some stuff. But then some people left because it was like, obviously it was cloudy and everything. And I was like, thank God, because I was nervous because when I went down there, it was sunny. The weather wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be really cloudy, which is what I wanted.
Right.
But gradually it started to get cloudy and everything, and I was like, yes. So yeah, it was an insane shoot, man. It really was.
Oh, which beach was it? Just out of curiosity.
North Wildwood.
Okay.
Which was where I actually shot the ending scene of Little Open Drive. No, but Dennis, I wanted to ask, what was your favorite scene like in Mortality?
Let me see if I can, because I only saw it once. I just saw it, so it's like my first reaction. I like the water. I like seeing the water in general, the waves. I like the scenes with the bird. I was gonna ask if there was symbolism, but you mentioned that alive and dead. But is there any symbolism behind the bird specifically?
Birds, actually, I mean, everything pretty much is
Okay.
symbolic from the Bible. But yeah, so the birds, a lot of times, birds kind of represent life in like the Bible. Like, there's a lot of times where you'll see birds shortly after, especially heavy in the New Testament. So I was going for that, but that's like, oh shoot, there's like literally just, they're dead now. It's like, and they're running away. It's like, that's not a good sign. That's also something that many films kind of take from like biblical literature and everything, among other stuff. But I like all those things. And you answered my next thing. I was actually going to ask like what was your favorite scene? But I like that. And then, how did you feel about the ending, like the very end? Like, what were your thoughts on like that?
I felt like it was inevitable, I guess,
Hmm.
as far as because death is always going to catch up to you.
Right.
It was almost like a relief, because
That's
I
good.
kind of anticipated it to happen throughout the movie. It was almost like a relief and like an easing of the tension that had been created throughout the film before, almost. Is that what you intended by it?
Yeah, I was definitely going for that, but in addition to that, I also wanted not only just for that relief, but also like that ambiguity, because when he says hark, it means like listen. So it's like, okay, he's saying listen to death, or a call out to God almost as like a last will, because I'll get into more so that, but it was almost like a call out, like a call out to God, death, whatever. But all you hear is the waves. So it's almost represent like nothing. for me, that was something that I really wanted to emphasize, and I thought, for me, like when I was making it, was really powerful because I feel like a lot of people, especially that are like really religious, kind of have this idea that it's like when you're about to die, it's like there's going to be like, gate of heaven open, or you'll see God, or if you're not Christian, you'll see the devil. But I was like, well, what if you don't see anything? What if you literally just see blackness? And that's why like I cut to black, and then he says hark, and it's like, I really wanted to emphasize that, but also the Bible throne scene. I wanted your thoughts on that.
The Bible in the ocean.
Yeah, like you see the Bible, and then the main character like reads it. He's like looking through it, and then he throws it down.
Does that indicate like disillusionment with the Bible, or like, yeah?
Well, so what I was going for, again, it's up to interpretation. What I was going for is that like he's running away from God. He's running away from the church. That's why those shots are like the church. He's running away from both death and the church. He's running and running. Literally, goes into, well, it's before he goes in the ocean, but he's like, thinking about his life and everything, and then he sees the Bible. It's almost like an opportunity where it's like almost like a life raft where it's like he has this opportunity. It's like he's reading through it, and he decides it's not for him, and he throws it away, and he would rather have death his way. Problem is, it wasn't death his way, because he washes back up on shore, and he has an opportunity, and he's happy because he's like, well, I didn't have to go through religion to get a second chance. I don't see death. This is awesome. And then next thing you know, he sees death, and it's like, oh, shoot, like you said, it's the inevitable. But the Bible throne scene, I was like, I wanted that there, especially not only because of all that I just mentioned, but also because depending on where people fall in terms of religion, you can look at it where it's like, oh, he threw the Bible away, he's getting what he's coming, because it's like for a lot of people, you don't do that.
Right.
So it's like, okay, that's a no-no. But then someone that might not be religious, they might look at it and say, well, it was his decision. Like, it's one of those things where it's like it's up to him. And it's like if he doesn't want to turn to that, that's fine. So there's a couple things I wanted to go for that, for the people that were kind of more intuitive towards that. But I was like, man, there's gonna be a lot of people that when he throws the Bible, they're gonna be like freaking out.
Wow, that's crazy. 'Cause I don't come from a religious background, so to me it doesn't. It's not like it's not jarring to me.
Doesn't spark it, yeah.
But that makes sense. Can you talk about some of the challenges of relying mostly on visuals instead of on dialogue? Like, what are some of the difficulties of that? And if you can contrast that process with the regular filmmaking process that has dialogue?
I think a lot of the things is that for many movies with a lot of dialogue, you can fall a lot more on that with explaining things.
Right.
There's not that trust because it's like you're pretty much you're spoon feeding them. With visual storytelling, it's like you're hoping that someone has the spoon already, and not that you're handing them the spoon and teaching them how to do it. You're hoping that they have the spoon, and they have the tools to be able to use it for their own good. Because visual storytelling is more interpretive. Like like we just watched this. Obviously, I was the one that made it, so I had like my intentions, and you got certain things from it as well. That's more so based on visual storytelling. When you have movies that are more dialogue heavy, there's less to really think about unless you're dealing with a subject like politics or religion, where it's like more controversial based. So I think that personally visual storytelling is more harder because there's less of an audience. There's less of an audience that can appreciate that. Like any A24 film, if you go on Rotten Tomatoes, you'll see it probably has a 45% from audiences, but it probably has a 90% on critics. Because critics watch a lot more movies, and it's like it takes a lot more for them to like really kind of click with them because they see so many movies where they're spoon feeding. So
that's interesting.
And I can say that from me personally because I'm a critic, so I'm like, that's just kind of like for me.
So when you watch movies, do you prefer ones that have less dialogue, more visual, or do you appreciate both equally?
Good question. I like both, and I appreciate both like equally. But if I had a gun to my head, I would probably choose visual storytelling more, just because you can watch it one day and get something from it, and then you can watch it a couple weeks later, or a couple months, or a year, whatever the case may be, and get something completely different. Versus dialogue, it's like you already know.
Right.
You already know what to expect. There's less of a mystery box, so to speak.
Right.
So that's a good question.
I think I have to get used to watching more visual because I still prefer the dialogue heavy because, it's easier for me to understand because I'm not as experienced of a viewer, I guess. But also, like, I think it's something about like clever and witty dialogue that really speaks to me personally. I
Right.
think like my whole life I've been kind of neglecting the visuals as much. Like you've been teaching me more of that. Now I'm kind of looking at that more.
Thanks, man.
But that's interesting that you feel that way.
Dialogue's great though. I mean, we both like The Sopranos quite a lot. I mean, The Sopranos has excellent writing. Definitely does have some visual storytelling there. I mean, the Pines Barren episode definitely does, where it's like that one. I feel like also has a lot more visual interpretation. Maybe we'll do a podcast episode about that. But yeah, I mean, it takes a little bit to get used to visual storytelling. It took me years because there were some movies I just kind of like wrote off, but I couldn't stop thinking about it because of the images, and so I would come back to it because of the images, and then just kind of pick up more and more.
And as far as visual storytelling, is that more referred to like the scenes and like the non-human visuals? What if it's not that much dialogue, but a lot of emphasis is placed on the actors' facial expressions and movements and stuff? Is that also considered like visual?
Yeah. Like even with the main character, I had it where it was like you don't really see too many like close-ups to him, but when you do, it's supposed to emphasize like his feelings and everything. And even just like little ticks that he did, like that was one thing I really kind of emphasized, where it's like, you know, his eyes are widening because it's like he sees something, or you know, he like falls to the ground because he's like, oh man, like, you know, or like, you know, his face when he's like running, like you just little things like that.
Right.
So,
but one thing I noticed as I was watching throughout several scenes was the usage of different aspect ratios. Can you talk about why you chose to use different aspect ratios and, you know, having them change throughout?
Oh, absolutely. So I was actually inspired by the movie Waves. Shout out to A24's 2019 near masterpiece. Aspect ratios with filmmakers, they have it where it's like there's a lot of like symbolism. So for me, I had 3 different aspect ratios, similar to, well, actually no, Will Open Drive I had 3 aspect ratios, but it was for different reasons. Like for that, it was to kind of showcase like the lack of seeing the big picture. It was like, you know, how it's like it's more self-contained, where it's like you're only seeing part of it, and how at the end you're seeing the full picture. With this film, Mortality, my thing was I wanted it to be where it's like you slowly start to realize that the aspect ratio is to represent death kind of like coming in.
Closing in on you.
Yes, which is why a lot of people, I'm sure, probably don't even notice the aspect ratio change until the end, because the first part it's like, you know, widescreen, then it's like it gets a little bit tighter, but like not enough to where it's like a big difference. And then by the third act, it's like you notice it, because it's like, wow, this is feeling really claustrophobic.
Right.
So I wanted that feeling of like claustrophobia, as well as like, you know, he's coming in, and then when he says "hark," cuts to black. You know, gives a little bit of time to breathe, as well as to showcase that it's like, you know, he's dead. But then there's that like release, and it's like the aspect ratio changes back to the original one, because there's that release of like, oh man, it's over. And you don't see him, so it's like it's up to interpretation. I know I mentioned that he's dead, but it's up to the viewer. It's like, did he die? You know, did he just get taken? What happened? You know, with that.
Right.
But it's supposed to be that kind of release. But aspect ratios, man, honestly, like it's one of those things I didn't pick up on until the last 3-4 years, I would say. But I have to say, it's like once you notice it in a film, it really helps out with picking up a lot of stuff.
So what are some films you think that use it particularly well, this technique?
Waves. I know you haven't seen it. No spoilers, obviously, but Waves is basically a 2-for-1 kind of movie. Like the movie starts off where it's like, you know, as the first half begins, it like gradually gets like tighter and tighter and tighter until like there's an event that happens, and then it's like the aspect ratio is 4:3. And then what happens is the second half it focuses on a different person, and the aspect ratio gets like further out and out and out. So there's that. So it's like the opposite. It's like the inversion of like what happened to the first half. And I just think that a film like that does it so well because it fits so well with the characters. And I think that that's a big thing that I wanted to go for with both Will Open Drive and Mortality, like fitting the character, fitting that narrative of what that character was going for.
So aspect ratios can change both like this and like this?
Yes. So in simple terms, one of the main things that you'll see like this way, you'll see it a lot in like older films because of the type of cameras they use, but nowadays it's the 4:3 aspect ratio. Most films use 16:9 aspect ratio, but you will see some, usually art house films, use 4:3 aspect ratio to give that kind of like old-fashioned
old-timey,
feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Interesting.
But I would recommend Waves. The Lighthouse, I was also... obviously, I use a different aspect ratio than The Lighthouse, but that's another film I would recommend, you know, with getting that atmosphere. That was the other thing. I wanted to focus more on the atmosphere of this film, like getting getting that vibe of like feeling like you're alone, feeling as though like you're isolated. So that's what I was going
It was very vibey. Like it's like a lot of vibes, you know, like atmosphere. That was a big thing I got from it.
Good. That means I did the job.
Right. Because even if I don't remember specifics, I remember the vibe.
Right.
If I watch it a few more times, I'll know the specifics. But now I got the vibe in my head, for sure. It has that death, impending death type of vibe, which is what you're going for.
Did you like? I wanted to also ask.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the black and white cinematography? Because I know you've seen my other stuff, and it was like color. Like, did you think that it fit, or was it one of those things where you kind of wish that it was in color?
No, I don't, because it definitely fit. Because if you're talking about death and stuff like that, and the ambiguity, what's going to happen to him, and with the topic mortality, I mean, black and white, that kind of dreary visual definitely fits the topic. So speaking of themes and messages, I mean, we kind of touched on this here and there, but just to get it out like by itself, just to have a clear answer. Not that there is maybe one clear answer, but what would you say is the overall message of the film?
Death is coming upon you, and it's like whether you're into religion or not, whether you're running away from both death and religion, it's gonna come. It's gonna catch up.
It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. I mean, that, like, I know it sounds pessimistic, but then again, it's like if people have seen my movies, they know like this is kind of like how I am, because I feel like in movies today, it's like there's just so many. It's like, it's gonna be a happy ending. It's like, yeah, but
how's the happy ending? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm not about that. So I just want people to get that feeling of like, look, this is gonna happen, and it's like whether you're religious or not, at the end of the day, we're all gonna die. So it's like let's just get along with the time that we have. Other thing I wanted to mention is I wanted that feeling to be on a beach, because I feel like when people think about beaches, they think about summertime, they think about happiness, they think about, and so I wanted to kind of go against the grain with that. I was like, well, what if stuff isn't happy going down with that? What about the stuff that isn't so happy about that?
Right.
I mean, I love going on the beach, I do, but it's like I just couldn't really stop thinking about that kind of stuff while watching.
You wanted to invert the expectation.
Right.
That's like if you were to have something really happy happen in a cemetery. Like,
it's actually not a bad idea. That's,
like,
gonna be my next movie. It's like something from the Lobster. I feel like.
Yeah, that could be.
Maybe I'll have to hire your worst Lanthimos. I'm kidding.
But yeah, no, that's an interesting concept. So, yeah, I guess, is there any final thoughts that you would like to add?
Nothing really. I mean, I think we pretty much covered everything, like, with what I was going for. Like I said, I mean, a lot of it, I did want the viewer to kind of come up with their own interpretation, but, obviously I went with what I was going for, and hopefully I, was able to explain that. I mean, with my next movie, obviously it's going to be even more different than that, but I'm just, I'm just glad that I was able to make it, because, dude, I was so nervous about it, because, like I said, just everything kind of came into place with, it finally getting cloudy and everything when it was supposed to. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think that's about it, though.
How long did it take you to film it? Or you said you went in different days, you kept shooting different, but how long, like, from when you started to when I got all my footage?
Let's see, I would say probably about 2 months.
Okay.
The actual principal photography in terms of like the actors, that took a day. But everything else in terms of like, the establishing shots, it was me going to the beach like several times, like, over the course of 2 months.
Nice.
So, but yeah, man, I mean, and I know you're going to be, working on my next film, so I'll be happy to have you on that.
I can't wait to be behind the scenes, see how the magic happens.
Yeah, man.
How the sausage is made.
But Dennis, thanks again for coming on.
No problem.
Glad that, we were able to do this, and we'll be next time probably even doing another movie.
Yeah,
or maybe a TV show. Probably a movie.
Probably a movie, yeah, because TV shows are a big commitment.
It's a lot.
Several months, and we don't want to do that. We want to probably start doing more of these podcasts, like, on a more regular basis, I would say.
Yeah,
and probably in person. Yeah, and in person, I think is better. I hope people enjoy this new setup. We're gonna keep working on it, see how it turns out. But I do think this in person, back and forth, is pretty cool. Maybe next time we could do it even like more casual. Maybe we have food and we're like eating or drinking coffee, and like, I don't know,
get to see us in 4K eating and beautiful sound,
like comedians in cars getting coffee. But I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed this.
Absolutely, guys. And
subscribe to Chad's channel.
And Dennis's. I'll be putting the link down for his. But guys, thank you as always. Don't forget the subscription, notification bell, and watch Mortality if you haven't already. And catch you guys later.
Peace.